Welcome you back to our study on the basics. We're starting into part 3 today. As we started in part 1, we left off with Zechariah. We left off with the whole idea that the world was going to be in this semi-light, semi-darkness, this doubtful position, this problem position, and that God was calling us to be a light to the world. And in order for us to be a light to the world, we have to get back and understand and have faith in Him. That means we have to get back to the basics. To get back to the basics, we have to know who we can trust. Uh, just seeing, the other day a news report, and it was talking about how much people trust the media. And of course, right now, there's a very, for certain groups of people, there's a very low percentage that trust the media on any level. And I look at that and say, well, if we can't trust, what should we do? You think about right now, as I'm recording this, we're in the middle of COVID and vaccines are coming out all over the place. And of course, the question today is, should we take the vaccine? Valid questions. And who can we trust? And that's the problem we're in. We're in this moment when we don't feel like we can trust almost anyone. And that's a problem. And so we have to get back to being able to trust God first and foremost. And as we learn to trust God, we can learn to know what those basics we have to know are and build from them. Again, our background, the fallen society of Greece. And here we have a quote from Socrates. The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for the elders and love chatter in places of exercise. You'd think Socrates was alive today and talking about our own society. People today are focused on luxury. A lot of people today, very bad manners. A lot of people today, contempt for all authority. A lot of people today, disrespect for their elders. And social media, love chatter in places of exercise. And so Socrates was a man ahead of his time, but the reality is, he was speaking about his own society, and his society crumbled. So we can take his wisdom and understand if we continue the path we're on, guess what? We also crumble. So let's get in today as we've started in each one of these studies, and I know we keep coming back to this, and we're going to keep coming back to this probably the entire study, because these are the points that are so important. John 14:6, Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. We've got to understand that absolute. There's no way to God except through Jesus Christ. He's the truth. If we want to get back to the basics and the truth, we've got to go through him. John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is one of the most important things. We, as individuals, even in the church, many of us are captive. We're captive to bubbles of our own thinking. Inside of our little bubbles are all the people that think like us. And we don't want anyone in our bubble that doesn't think like us. And that's a real problem, especially in the political landscape of today. But here it tells us, when we arrive at the truth of Jesus Christ, it sets us free. We're no longer in that bubble. We no longer only have to love the people who think like us. We can love everyone. Like Jesus said when he was on the cross looking down at the people mocking him, Father, forgive them. He was able to love them even though they weren't inside of his own sphere. We can't do that until we get to Jesus. The way, the truth, the life. He, that truth, his truth is what sets us free. And so we started out talking about the need to find truth and to find it in Jesus Christ. In our second study, we talked about the earth, the universe, and many of the things around us that help us understand the way of God, the absolute truths of God. Today, I want to focus on something a little bit closer to home. Even in the midst of this pandemic of COVID, some things that we can touch on here that come up today. But I'd like to touch on the body and the health. I'd like to touch on those things that God created here in me, in you, things that we can personally take to heart that will give us some confidence in what God has done. For many years, there were people who thought it was good enough to bathe in stagnant water. Now, science is confirming that what the Bible has always told us when it comes to germs and sickness, running water is the key. I think about this, I was born and raised in northern part of the United States. Of course, I think back a couple generations from me. Of course, the northern part of the United States, specifically Minnesota, where I was born and raised, is freezing cold for too much of the year. And that freezing cold doesn't allow you to go out and just have running water. I mean, today we live in a luxury world because we got tap water coming inside of the house and inside of our showers. But there was a time they didn't have that. In January and February, in order for someone to wash clothes, in order for someone to bathe, you had to collect up a bunch of snow, bring it in and melt it. That was actually really common. Apart from that, it was very difficult. Maybe you had to go cut a hole in a lake or in a stream to get your water. It was not an easy task anyway. And so typically because of the cost, and of course getting that snow, getting that water, it was either freezing cold or close to it. You had to heat it up. And so you've got this expenditure of firewood on the stove, which is costly because, it takes a lot of effort and work to go out and cut all that firewood. And so people tried to reduce their costs, reduce the things around them. And oftentimes, it's just the way it was. You took and you heated up water. You put it in this tub, if you had a tub. You put it in this tub. Maybe dad bathed first. Maybe the kids all bathed next. Maybe mom bathed last. Who knows? Something like that. But inevitably, everyone bathed in the same water. Maybe even washed some clothes in the same water. And there was a lot of sickness. If we go back into that time period, we find that people, their longevity, the average life expectancy was not long. A lot of sicknesses, a lot of problems that people didn't even understand. But Leviticus, we're talking about in the beginning of your Bible. Leviticus 15, chapter 15, verse 3 tells us, "And when he that hath an issue is cleansed of his issue, then he shall number to himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in" what? "In running water, and he shall be clean." It told us all the way back there that this was part of being clean. This is where science is telling us now this is true. Science is proving that if we really want to be clean, it's necessary to have running water. And so, when you're talking about sickness, disease, go wash your hands. And don't just stick your hands under the water, get them a little wet, put a little bit of soap on them and run away. I know we've got busy lives. Stick your hands under there, wash them good, put lots of soap suds on there. Get them good and clean. This is what's necessary. It's that cleanliness that helps us avoid so many problems. This is part of the truths that we need to follow. We wonder about what's truth. Do we need a mask or no mask? Here's truth for you. This is truth. If you want to stop sickness, germs, running water, it's a key issue. Put it to heart. For many years, there were people who taught that it was good to bleed people who were sick. I know some of you have probably heard of that. It was common to put leeches on people to draw out the sickness. Today's science has shown us that the reality is health comes from healthy blood. That is bringing life-giving nutrients to every cell in the body. And so what we need is healthy blood, bringing vitamins and minerals to our body. Taking out our blood doesn't help us. Bleeding us doesn't help us. And so, what does it tell us in Leviticus 17:11? "For the life of the flesh is where? In the blood. And I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul." We need healthy blood. If we want to be healthy, the first place is not to bleed us. The first place is to make sure we're healthy. And so that means having a good diet. And all of this has to do also with this COVID going around, of course, and any other sickness, flu, colds, you name it, doesn't really matter. If we start with a healthy diet, with a healthy lifestyle, with a healthy body, we're the least likely to get sick. And when we do get sick, we're likely to not stay sick as long as other people. That's what we need to do. And so, you want health? Make sure your blood's healthy. That's the first place. Make sure your blood has in it what it needs to take to your body and keep your body healthy. This is what we need. We don't need bleeding people like they used to do. And a lot of people died. I believe Washington, if I'm not mistaken, President Washington was one of those who was bled and died because of it. That's not about life. And, we think about that today. There's a lot of issues going around where people are doing ridiculous, stupid things, and it's not about life. In South America, I was just reading a news report. Some judge ordered a doctor to give an injection of bleach to someone who was sick. Of course, the person died. This is just ridiculous. You can't hope to do stupid things and survive, at least not for very long. And so the key here is life is in the blood. Keep our blood healthy. We keep our body healthy. We give ourselves longevity. God told us how to do it, where to start, and we can trust in His Word. I have a wonderful image here on the right-hand side. What is Dave made of? There's a list here, probably small depending on the side of your screen. If you're looking at this on a phone, you probably can't read it at all. If you got it on a computer, you'll likely be able to read it. But on the right-hand side is a list of elements. And starting at the very top, oxygen. Of course, it gives us on the far right the mass. This is what your body is made up of. It has been shown to us that Genesis is correct when it says mankind was made from the dust of the earth. There it is. Science has taken us apart and found out we're made of dust of the earth. Genesis 2:7. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. The important thing for us is that we're a living soul. We're not just all these elements. But yes, we are just dust of the earth. That's what we were created from. And we can show the makeup, the ingredient list. With this ingredient list, we are on the verge of being able to recreate a body. But what we can't do is breathe in the living soul. We can't do it. We can't animate it in a real way. And so this is important. We can trust God from the very beginning. He told us what He made us of and what we're laid out, what we're made of. And over again, science just continues to prove that what God told us is true. The Bible tells us that in the beginning, God created male and female. Science tells us that only by way of a male and a female can you have reproduction. Science tells us that. Any scientist, I don't care where you go, if you go to any scientist, even the most woke scientist, they might try to skirt the issue, but if you get them right down, wrestle them down to it, they will tell you the only way to have reproduction is with a male and a female. No other way. It's an impossibility. And Genesis tells us in 1:27 and 28, so God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He, him, male and female created He them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. God created us specifically. And we're living in a world right now where they're trying to eliminate these terms, these gender terms of male and female. They don't want there to be fathers and mothers. They don't want there to be guys and gals. They want there just to be its. There are no its. You cannot have reproduction with just its. It doesn't work. You've got to have two genders, and we know that right down at the scientific level, chromosomes, a woman has two X's, a man has an X and a Y. Just that simple. Every man has an X and Y. Every woman has an X and X. We do know also that because of probably more than anything, our own mismanagement of this world, we have poisoned ourselves in some ways from time to time, and they cause oddities. Let's just say things that aren't just quite right. But that's not the rule. That's the exception. And we should never take the exception and use it to cover the rule. In this world, 99.9% of the time, you need an XX chromosome person and an XY chromosome person to be able to have reproduction. Without it, you can't have it. And so anything else is abnormal. Just that simple. And we need to accept that. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. That doesn't diminish anything else out there. It's just stating what is. We need a person with an XX and a person with an XY. From there, we can proceed and have children. We can multiply, we can prosper, we can have a better world. But if we deny these simple, absolute facts, we get into trouble. The Bible tells us that life begins at the fertilization of the egg, and that once the first cell is formed, only nutrition and oxygen are added. And we have in this image here, day one, fertilization. When does life begin? Day one. Very important. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nation. God knew Jeremiah in the very beginning, before he was actually formed. Because what you have, and the image shows this, on day one, fertilization, you have sperm and egg, but there's not a person there. Okay, day 5, you have the blastocyst. You have this bunch of cells growing into something. Day 28, you have the beginning of something. Still doesn't look like a human in any way, but it does have a heart in it. That's 30 days in almost, a month in almost. God said even before all of this formed, he knew Jeremiah. Life began at the fertilization of the cell. That's important, because today the fight is over killing innocents. Who has the right to take the life of an innocent? Pretty important to think about. Abortion is one of the biggest issues today, and it's an issue inside of the church. Unfortunately, too many people are willing to have an abortion as long as it's prior to a month, prior to 6 months, whatever. But the world is sliding to where they would like to be able to kill a child at any age. Maybe you say, well, I don't agree with killing a child at any age. Fine, that's great. We've got to back it all the way up. I know it's difficult. I know that there's cases out there and specialty cases. And again, I wouldn't want necessarily, it's hard because it's hard to we want to have laws to protect children, but at the same time, we want doctors to have the freedom to do what they need to do to save whoever they can. And I want doctors to have that freedom. I don't want them to be forced to do what might kill or jeopardize a life. I want them to be able to do whatever is necessary in an emergency to save whatever lives are possible to save. I want them to have that freedom. But at the same right, I don't want people just to be able to go out and kill babies. That hurts me. I know it doesn't hurt me specifically, but to know that there are children out there, no matter how small they are, that are being killed, it pains me because their lives are valuable. Jesus died for them as much as for me and you. And their lives need to be protected. As long as they are unable to protect themselves, they depend on us to protect them. Now, at what level are we willing to protect them? That's what we have to ask. And each one of us has to come to terms with that. And whatever terms you come to, that's where it's at. I'm not going to throw you out of my life because your terms are not my terms. But what I want you to understand is we've got to come to these truths. God knew Jeremiah from the beginning and called him and sanctified him as a prophet. That's important. What if Jeremiah's mother had said on day one, if I take the pill the day after, I don't have to have this child. I won't need to even name Jeremiah. Okay? Think about that. I know that's hard to think about, but how many prophets have been killed? We say, well, God can take care of his own. Yes, he can, but he still gives us free will agency. And Jeremiah's mother had free will agency. She could have aborted Jeremiah, and we wouldn't have his writings. And so I think we need to put these things into perspective. There's a truth out there. And we need to find a way to follow that truth because it's the only way we're going to be good with God. The Bible tells us that in the beginning, God created a book of information that is us. Science now tells us that book of information now tells us that book of information in which everything we are stored is called our DNA. Science discovered DNA in 1869 through the biochemist Frederick Mischer. Entonces, the Bible and Psalms, from the beginning, God laid out what he did. But here we have in Psalms 139, 15 and 16, my substance was not hid from thee. That's your genetic material. When I was made in secret inside of his mother's womb and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, still forming, just as we showed in that previous picture, and in thy book all of my members were written, your genetic, your DNA, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. That first day, the sperm, the egg come together, life begins, in there is the DNA that will be that person. It's all there. Nothing more, nothing left. It's just a matter of adding minerals in, that dust that we talk about in the previous slide, all that list of chemicals we put into there, and eventually it forms a body. That's what it's talking about here. All of our members were written in that DNA, in that genetics. And that's awesome that God knew all of that. And we're just discovering that God knew all that. That to me is just awesome. I just love God and I love everything he has done for us. The Bible also tells us that we have one common set of parents, Adam and Eve, and that all mankind came from them. And I know when it comes down to atheists and, of course, unbelievers, they don't want to believe that for anything. Acts 17:26 tells us, and hath made of one blood all nations of men, for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. So God made us all from one blood, one nation. And of course, now in genetics, in human genetics, the mitochondrial Eve, also the MT-Eve, and the MT-MRCA is the multilineal, most recent common ancestor. Science is seeing it through genetics of all living humans. In other words, she, because yes, she is a double X chromosome, she is defined as the most recent woman from which all living humans descended in an unbroken line, purely through their mothers and through the mothers of those mothers, back until the lines converge into one woman, our mitochondrial Eve. The beginning of mankind, of all blood hath made of all nations. And I think this is pretty important today when we begin to look at the political ambience of the world. We begin to see a little bit of, I really don't want to use the word racism, because I think that's a very misused word, and I think it's an abused word. But we do begin to see a little bit of this pride in our nationality. I'm from this nation. I'm better than other people. We've got to be really careful, because as it says here, God made us of one blood. We are all one family. You know, it's one of the difficulties I have when we think about nations. Now, I know, of course, we just read here that God has given us bounds of our habitation, and I understand all that. And I understand that every nationality to God is very important, and I appreciate all the distinction between them all. But I have this real difficulty with the idea of borders and frontiers. Because why do I want to keep out my family? They're all my family. They're all from the same biological parents in the beginning. They should be as important to me as anyone. Would I want to keep my children out? And unfortunately, we've come to this point where we want to keep people out. And we're not understanding there are people. They may be today from a different nation, but none of that's important at the very basic of levels. We're all from one blood. Doesn't matter where they're from. We're all family. And we need to put that in our minds, because when we lose track of that, we begin dividing us up, and we should never divide ourselves up. There may be distinctions. Maybe some group wants to wear one style of clothing and another style of clothing, whatever. That's their prerogative. But we should never be dividing people up. Our job as believers is to have one people. And that doesn't mean we're all the same. It doesn't mean we all walk around in white t-shirts. That just means that we are all believers the same. And we accept that. Not a problem. And that's pretty important. The Bible tells us that we're not just basic elements. We've talked about this a little bit already, but that inside of every person is a spirit, which is their true person. We understand that pain, heat, or cold are all electrical impulses that are understood or interpreted in the brain. Yet we don't feel them in our brains, but at the site of the impulse. This is a pretty difficult concept, I know, for most people to understand, but if you take your arm right now and pinch yourself till it hurts, or there's some discomfort. Think about that for just a second. Now, where you just pinched yourself, you felt pain. But there was no pain there. The pain where you pinched yourself went up your body, a signal, an electrical impulse went from that point up your body on these little electrical lines in your body up into your brain. Your brain said something happened, this is what happened, this is what you feel, but you didn't feel it here. Okay? Think about a light switch. You move the light switch to turn your lights on and off. Okay, something happens in that light switch. Why didn't you feel the pain in your head where the electrical impulse burst? You had this electrical charge came up here and bing, something went on. You got hurt. You got some discomfort. You've got a pain in your arm where you pinched yourself, okay? But the discomfort's not up here where the electrical impulse discharged. The discomfort is all the way back down to the site where you pinched yourself. Makes no sense. None at all, actually. Even in science, it makes no sense, because the pain should have been up here, and the pain wasn't. And that's interesting. Now, if you think about this one step more, people who have had limbs removed, amputated legs, amputated arms, from time to time they feel what's called ghost pains. It's a pain in that leg, a pain in that arm, a pain in that body part that doesn't exist. How does that happen? Okay? And so what we have here is a level of complication in this very simple machine that we call our body. Science has taken apart the body. We understand the nerves. We understand the nerve endings. We understand all the minerals that this body is made of. But we can't figure out is, why do you feel a ghost pain? Why, when I pinch my arm, do I not feel that in my head where the electrical pulse is discharging? Why do I feel it in my arm? We can't understand it. But it's because the Bible tells us the answer, and science doesn't want to accept it. Inside of us, there's another piece to us. That part that's inside of us is called our spirit. Zechariah 12:1. The burden of the word of the Lord of Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Inside of us is another piece of us, the spirit. That's the part that keeps going. That's the part that joins all of this dust, water, oxygen, minerals together, and turns us into a living machine. That when you smash your thumb with a nail, it is your thumb that hurts, or with a hammer, it is your thumb that hurts, and not some impulse in your head saying, hey, you just smashed your thumb with a nail. Okay? These are the complexities that we can know. God created all of this. He told us He created us all of this. And he let us know so that we would trust him. This was all created perfectly. Psalms 139:14, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. Everything about us proves the marvelous wonder of God. It's just so awesome. And I hope that some of this will help you have a stronger confidence in God. I know it's easy for us to want to trust, to some degree, science and whatnot. And obviously, where science proves God's true, we can trust him, as we've seen in multiple segments of this study. But the reality is our firmest foundation has to be God. Build on this rock, and your house will stand. In our next study, we're going to cover a few more things in the creation of God and the nature of God, because we really just have to have faith in him. We've got to become that light. In the world that is denying absolute truth, in a world that can't figure out what 2 plus 2 equals, we need to be the people that hold the truth. Not just the truths of this world, but the truths of the gospel. In a world that begins teaching all kinds of nutty things. Because if you start looking at churches today, you will find, I guarantee it, the most nutty beliefs. We need to be the people that are guardians of the truth. Not guardians of personal dogma. Guardians of absolute truth. That's what we're here for. We are a royal priesthood, a royal people. We keep the faith. Thank you for your time. I hope this blesses you in your life. God bless.